than 100 ever reach the egg. And then they have to work together to release enough enzymes to eat away at the follicular fluid so that can impregnate the egg. Okay. Now, eggs, again, only viable for 24 hours. You have a very small window of opportunity to get pregnant every month. Sperm are viable up to 6 days. So with perfect conditions in the lab, they've kept them swimming around in test tubes for 6 days. Now, they suspect in the human body, life is rarely a picnic. It's never perfect conditions. So even though they can technically live up to 6 days, they suspect it's probably closer to 3 days actual viability, but you never know. You could have a really good one that lasts for 6 days. And again, this is why counting your days for ovulation can be problematic, because even if you count perfectly and you're like ovulated this day and you are ovulating for those 24 hours, unfortunately, if you're trying to avoid pregnancy, not having sex for that 24 hours might not be enough, because if you had sex a few days beforehand, that sperm could just be waiting patiently for the egg to pop in. So in theory, to make sure you don't get pregnant, you shouldn't have sex at least a week before you ovulate. So that can be a little tough for some people, especially newlyweds. They like each other still, that kind of scenario. So this is why counting method fails very frequently. You have to count on your ability to count and hope that the sperm die. Okay. So this is where you get a lot of oopsies from the counting method. So even though it only takes one little sperm to penetrate the egg, it does take dozens to produce enough of the enzymes, proteinases, halidurinases that are in that acrosomal cap to eat away at the follicular fluid to make a pathway for that sperm to penetrate that egg. So they have to work cooperatively. Now, once the sperm penetrates the egg's membrane is going to change consistency. She has all these little cortical granules, these little bubbles all along the edges. And as soon as the sperm breaches, all those little bubbles rupture. It's basically like an alarm system for the egg. Once it releases its content, it's full of zinc. That zinc changes the consistency of the cell membrane so no other sperm can penetrate. So once we have that one penetration, the shields go up, she goes into lockdown, and nobody else can get in, which is a good thing because extra DNA is deadly for animals. Now, if you are plants are freaky deaky, you can have all kinds of genetic mutations, and they usually try to breed for those things. This is the reason why a lot of your pretty plants like roses are steriles, because they're genetic freaks. Instead of having diploid numbers, they have triploid or quadruploid or quintuploid. So lots of extra DNA to look pretty, but they're sterile because they're genetic freaks. In animals, they don't survive with the extra DNA. Just one little extra DNA is enough to cause things like Down syndrome. So you can imagine if you had double sets and triple sets, those organisms don't survive. So we want to prevent any extra sperm from getting in. Now, if two sperm penetrate at the exact same moment or before the cortical granules rupture all the way around, if you get two that penetrate, that's called polyspermy, and the offspring will not survive. They cannot survive having, bless you, that extra DNA. So it will not develop normally, and you'll usually miscarry, most often before you even know that you're pregnant. Now, for fertilization to complete, the female pronucleus, that's her genetic material, and the male pronucleus, his genetic material, have to combine together. So fertilization starts with the penetration of the sperm into the egg, and it completes with amphimixis. And again, amphi means both, and mixis means mixing it up. So we're mixing up the male and the female DNA coming in. Now, amphimixis may take a few minutes to hours for it to complete, depending on where that sperm's DNA is compared to that egg's DNA. They have to come together and combine. So you can still have fertilization of an egg, the penetration of the sperm, without it being successful. Sperm will penetrate a dead egg. It's not like it's like, well, she's spoiled. But just because, again, it penetrates doesn't mean you're going to have amphimixis complete. Okay, so you have to have both of these components happen to be a successful offspring. And there she is being surrounded by the guys. And they're all releasing their enzymes, halidurinases, proteinases, to eat away at the follicular fluid. That's going to basically be fluid with some cells and proteins and stuff. Once he's able to get through, once the male penetrates, these are those cortical granules that are going to line underneath all of the cell membranes. And as soon as he starts rupturing a couple of them when he dives in, they're all going to subsequently rupture and burst, releasing all that zinc. That's going to change the consistency of the cell membrane, preventing any other sperm from coming in. So essentially putting her into lockdown. So hopefully only one sperm gets in and it can be a successful fertilization.
So is that a communication system that they use, like some sort of communication they use when that one guy gets in, or
so
how do they all know to just?
It's
rupture?
not that they're all going to turn they're still going to try to invade.
Okay.
It's once we change the consistency of that cell membrane, they won't be able to eat through the membrane anymore.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
So embryology, the study of embryonic development. So in humans, this is roughly 266 days from conception. And again, most women don't know the exact moment conception happens, unless you're like one of those aliens from a movie. You're not like, oh, it just happened. So oftentimes they back it up to the woman's last period. She usually knows when her last period was. So that's why a lot of times they bring it back those extra 2 weeks, and that gives you about 280 days from the last menstrual cycle. And again, this isn't always perfect, depending on the female and her cycling and all that kind of fun stuff. So it takes extra classes to study embryology. That's the difference between a gynecologist, just a female plumbing expert, and an OBGYN, female plumbing plus baby stuff. So sometimes if you get just the gynecologist and you get pregnant, they're like, congratulations, go to a different doctor. Because they're like, that ain't my job, man. So you get in to deal with those people. Now, the time of prenatal development, of course, is known as gestation. And as we've probably heard people rumor about, it occurs in 3 different phases. So our first phase is the first trimester. And again, the trimesters are 12 weeks. That's where trimester comes from, is that 12-week number. So conception to week 12 of the development. And again, most doctors bring us back to our last period because that one is kind of known compared to the actual date of conception unless you're actively trying. So that's why that first trimester sometimes may seem a little longer. They count the 2 weeks that you weren't pregnant, that you were preparing for pregnancy, plus the 12 weeks. This is the most important time. If you don't make it during the first 12 weeks, you will never make it. So if you don't make a stomach, you'll never have a stomach. If you don't make the brain, you'll never have the brain. At the end of 12 weeks, the entire baby is already made. Now it just has to grow. It just has to get bigger and able to sustain life outside of the womb. So this is going to be very crucial. This is also the time, obviously, where we let mom know that we're pregnant so she doesn't have a period and wash everything down the stream. So we can, survive for the next few months, that scenario. 50 to 80% of conceptions will end in natural miscarriages. So it's very common for women who are actively or sexually are going to be able to be pregnant quite frequently. But of course, only 50 to 80% are not going to survive. That means you're looking at 50 to 20% success rate. So when we talk about it's really hard for a woman to get pregnant, a lot of people, it's the easiest thing ever. No, not really. It's you beat the odds every time you get pregnant because there's a good chance that something's going to happen wrong. A cell doesn't divide properly. The developing embryo doesn't implant properly. The hormone levels aren't at the right level and you have that miscarriage. So sometimes women, they'll be like, oh, I thought I was pregnant and then my period happened, so I really wasn't pregnant. It's like, you really were, but you just had miscarriage. It was just very, very early on. So this is why sometimes you'll have women be a week late and they're like, oh, I thought I was, but I wasn't. No, you weren't. You just weren't enough to keep things going. Okay, so it does happen much more frequently than most people give credit to. And again, many of those are in that first 6 to 12 days before it even implants and sets up communication with mom. And that, again, is because if there's not enough nutrients, if there's not cells dividing like they're supposed to, happening at this point that they're supposed to, it's not going to be successful. So we have 4 different stages within the first trimester. So our first one is cleavage. Okay, so cleavage means to cleave or cut. This is where we're going to divide the cell. So after amphimixis, we have that single cell zygote. Okay, so that brand new genetically unique individual. And that zygote is going to start subdividing into smaller and smaller cells. So 2 cell stage, 4 cells, 8 cells, 16, 32, 64, bigger numbers I don't want to do anymore. So after that first division, we're no longer called the zygote. We're officially called a pre-embryo because we're just dividing cells at this moment. You can't tell tops from bottoms or anything like that. The cells that are produced with each division are called blastomeres. Again, we learned blast means active cells. So these are definitely active cells that are dividing. Now, as each time those blastomeres divide, the cells will actually get smaller and smaller. So even though we are going to be dividing for the next week or so, we don't grow in the size of the embryo or pre-embryo, we grow in the number of cells within that pre-embryo. So again, we learned that back in A&P1. Growth can be growth in size or growth in number of cells. So the cells are actually getting smaller and smaller and smaller with each division. We're just getting more and more cells. So there's growth, but not getting bigger overall. After about 3 days, we've had enough division that we have this mass of cells. This mass of cells is called a morula. So it's a solid ball of cells. Morula is Latin for raspberry, because somebody thought it looks like a raspberry. Then after we have that morula, it's going to start distributing those cells. Instead of just dividing aimlessly and just making this big mass of cells, they're going to start organizing. They're going to put all those blastomeres around the outside, and that middle portion is going to stay hollow. That middle portion is going to become a blastocyst, a blastocele, the cavity. Cele means cavity. The cells are still called blastomeres, and they're going to be on the outside. That's referred to as a blastoderm, a covering of blastomeres. The whole organism by day 2 or day 5 altogether is going to be called that blastocyst. So it basically goes from being a raspberry to a soccer ball at this point. Okay? Now, as mentioned, even though we've had lots and lots of division, by day 5, we now have thousands of cells. We're still the same size as that single cell zygote. We just have increase in the number of cells. So there it is. Our egg ovulates and gets surrounded by the little spermies. There's fertilization hour 0. So penetration of that egg by that sperm. That sperm will release his pronucleus, basically decapitates himself. The female pronucleus, they will combine to form, again, through the process of amphimixis. Once we've got that happening, we are that single cell zygote. So roughly about 30 hours in, we will have our first stage of cleavage. We'll divide into 2 cells from that single cell. And we will continue to divide on a pretty regular basis. By day 3, hour 72, we have a morula. Okay, so that bundle of cells, that's just solid cells. Then over the next 2 days, so by the end of day 5, we'll have a blastocyst. So all the blastomeres will be on the outside. The cavity will be the blastocele. So now instead of a raspberry, we are a soccer ball. And now that we're a soccer ball, hopefully we've made it to the uterus. Okay. If for some reason we don't make it, that's when you end up with that ectopic pregnancy. Because again, it doesn't know where it's at, where it's located. It just knows once it gets to a certain point in cell division, it's time to start burrowing in. So it doesn't matter where it is, it's going to drop out and burrow into the tissue. Of course, if it hits the uterus, yay, you're going to have successful pregnancy. If it doesn't, then you're going to have problems. And so there's no way to stop it or encourage it to float around for a little bit longer. Now, when it comes into the uterus, it can land anywhere. Okay, so it could go in the top, it can go in the sides, what have you. Wherever it lands and burrows in, that's where the placenta is going to attach. So this is how sometimes you can have problems with the placenta where it blocks the exit port. If it attaches too low, that placenta will actually just grow over the cervix, which would mean you'd have to give birth to the placenta first, which would kill the baby because it would suffocate. So in those cases, that's where you have to have the C-sections for health reasons. Other times, they'll be anywhere within the uterus. It's just luck of the draw where it drops out and burrows in. So implantation, day 6, we're going to start implantation regardless of where we're located within the female system. And this process can take a full week for it to burrow into and establish it's like a colony of cells. It's like a little invasion force. So that blastocyst is going to invade the endometrium. And it doesn't just sit softly on the surface. It's going to burrow in kind of like a chigger. And as it burrows in, it's going to change its shape. It's no longer going to be this nice spherical organized soccer ball. You're going to have different cells having different jobs. This is where we're going to have the division of labor. These are going to be eating burrowing cells. These cells are going to start separating off. And we're going to start dividing who's going to become the placenta, who's going to become the baby, all that kind of scenario. So we're going to start building those connections with mom, because all along this first week, we've just been running off of our own nutrients. So we really need to make sure that we can establish connections so we can start hooking up to get nutrients for mom, but also so we can signal to mom that there's a bun in the oven. It's not, don't go through the self-clean cycle, that kind of scenario. So during this time, we're going to build those foundations of the blood network, the placenta. We're going to start building amniotic fluid. We're going to start building the amnion or amniotic membrane. When we look at mammals, mammals are amniotes. So amniotes includes mammals and birds and reptiles. Amniotes have a 4-membraned egg. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's what you cook up for an omelet or what you've got in your body, you're going to have the same membranes. The first membrane is the yolk membrane. That's going to separate the nutritive source from everybody else. So obviously in a chicken or a reptile egg, it's a yolk, you can see it. In mammals, you can also see the yolk. So if you have a skilled sonogram person at your first sonogram, you can often see the yolk with your baby because they're still living off that thing. The yolk, bless you, is going to make blood for the first few weeks because we don't have bone marrow yet. So the yolk is going to be used for nutritive sources, but it also is going to set up a lot of the blood formations that's going to obviously fuel the baby's distribution of nutrients, stuff like that. And again, this is why when you cook or boil eggs, the outside of the yolk tends to be a slightly different color than the inside of the yolk because it has a different membrane covering around. And if you cook it, it turns out kind of weird green color because of the protein content. The next membrane we have is the amnion. The amnion is going to be around the outside of the baby. So that's the one that we think of. That's the sac that breaks so your water can break. So it's basically a plastic bag holding all the stuff together. In chickens and reptiles, the amnion is a small area in the beginning. If you've ever gotten fresh chicken eggs, so not from Walmart, because by the time they're at Walmart, they're already about a month or so old. But when you get a very fresh one, there'll be a white spot on top of the yolk, even if it's never met a male. So even though it's not fertilized, that white spot is the amnion. So if it was a fertilized egg, that's where the baby chicken would be growing during the development, would be within that amnion. You're going to have an alkaloid. The alkaloid is going to separate urine developed from the baby from everywhere else. So obviously, if you're trapped in an egg for your entire developmental cycle, that alkaloid is going to be really important so you don't swim around in your pee. Now, again, with your reptiles and birds, they have uric acid, so it's more pasty crystalline, but it's going to help separate the waste products from the baby within the egg. Now, in humans, in mammals, the amnion and alkaloids often fuse together. That gives it a stronger membrane so it doesn't rupture as easily. So you don't usually get to see that difference in humans or in mammals compared to chickens and reptiles and stuff. And then the outermost membrane is the chorionic membrane. If you've ever noticed when you have a boiled egg, there's always a dimple in an air pocket. Okay, that air bubble is surrounded by the chorion. Okay, and that keeps that air bubble separate. This is their breathing apparatus. So when you have a developing baby, there'll be lots of blood vessels on the inside of the chorion. This is their ability to exchange oxygen back and forth. So it acts almost like their placenta. They don't really truly have a placenta, but close enough. So you're always going to have that bubble. So again, if you've boiled eggs, you'll notice there's always that little membrane on the outside, and then especially around the bubble, there's like a double layer you have to peel. Egg boiling. Okay, so that first membrane is the chorion that's going to adhere to the inside of the shell and helps keep that bubble separate. And then the alkaloid is going to adhere to the egg white. So that's the layers that you have to get rid of. And again, if you're not boiling your egg, if you just crack open your egg, of course, the goo that sticks to the shell that you're like, get out of my egg, that's the chorion not wanting to come off of the inside of the egg. And you can kind of feel it. It's kind of shimmering on the inside. So some of the chunky is the alkaloids and the chorion whenever you scramble your eggs and such. Okay. Now, that amniotic cavity is going to again be walled around and is going to allow for the development of the baby. And we're going to start making that fluid within the cavity. Here we're going to separate into our 3 germ layers. Again, all animals that are triploid, so that's flatworms and above, so everybody but sponges and cnidarians or jellyfish. They're kind of primitive guys. If we have 3 layers, again, we're able to have connective tissue, we're able to have muscles, okay? So we have those 3 germ layers. You're going to have the endoderm. The endoderm would be the cells that originally face the blastocele, the cavity. The endoderm is going to become inner epithelial lining. So it's going to become the lining of the digestive tract. It's going to become the lining of the urinary system, of the reproductive system, of the respiratory system. So those epithelial tissues come from the endoderm. The ectoderm, again, is on the outside, outside. That's going to become the epithelial tissues associated with the surface. So that's going to be your epidermis, your hair, your nails. That's going to come from the ectoderm. Your nervous system comes from the ectoderm. So in the beginning, the nervous system's on the outside of the body, and then it kind of dives in. The body wraps around it, kind of like dipping a weenie into cornbread mix so you can make a corn dog.
Cool.
Okay, so that nervous tissue is going to dive down and get wrapped around. So the nervous tissue is going to come from the ectoderm. The upper epithelial tissues, the upper layer of the skin and stuff, is going to come from the ectoderm. Mesoderm, middle layer, all muscle comes from mesoderm. So fat or bone or teeth or, areolar or connective tissue. So when we look at the skin, the epidermis is from the ectoderm, the dermis is from the mesoderm. And you'll have that division. So your book goes into detail which parts of the digestive system are going to come from the endoderm, which parts of the digestive system are going to come from the mesoderm, that kind of scenario. But if it's connective tissue, if it's muscle, mesoderm, middle layer. Upper epithelial and nervous tissue, ectoderm, endoderm, inner linings. Okay, so endothelium. So there it is, getting ready to burrow into mom. So day 8, there it goes. So you're going to have a whole bunch of cells, again, that help burrow in. So you have these syncytiotrophoblasts. Aren't you glad you don't have to actually know these words? Yay. But again, syn is together, cyte is cell, troph, eat, blast, active. These are actively eating cells working together to eat through mom's endothelium. So it's going to burrow in and eat its way into the functional layer. Behind that, you're going to have the cytotrophoblasts. They're still eating their way in. Okay, so they're still burrowing into mom. Then you have day 16. Isn't it adorable? It looks like it's daddy. Not really, but anywho. So here again, you're going to have the embryonic stalk. We are going to have the yolk sac holding the yolk. So we're going to sequester all of our nutrients to that one location and bound it by the yolk sac. The altinoids, they're pointing to it around the outside here, but it eventually is going to wrap and fuse to the amnion. And there's the amnion that is going to surround the baby. That's going to be the baby. So you're going to have the endoderm being the inner layer, the mesoderm being muscles and connective tissues, and the ectoderm being the nervous tissue and the epiparts of the skin. So essentially it kind of flips itself around and forms a ball-like structure and then eventually up baby. There's the chorionic villi. So that's the chorion, the other membrane that's going to help be that boundary between mom and the developing materials. That's the conceptious. That's going to be the baby and all the stuff that comes with the baby. So in placental mammals, the chorion is going to help be the foundations of the placenta and be that boundary between mom and baby. So presentation, we need to make a placenta because we need to start cycling nutrients off of mom, and we also need to start making hormones so mom knows we're on board, so don't go through the self-clean cycle. So we are going to have the placenta start forming around day 11. So by this point, we should be implanted into and start building up those different parts of the developing conceptus. And again, conceptus is everything that comes with the conception. So the baby, the placenta, the amniotic fluids, all that kind of stuff. So the formation of the placenta is necessary, obviously, to nourish the growing baby. It should provide dominant source of nutrients by week 9. So up until week 9, that yolk sac is still providing a lot of the nutrients to fuel all these activities. And this is why if you've ever been pregnant, when you call your doctor and you're like, good news, I'm pregnant. They're like, that is great. Well, I'll see you in 9 weeks. And you're like, but I'm pregnant today. Don't you want this? They don't care. They don't want to see you until 9 weeks because, one, there's a lot that could go wrong. You could miscarry very easy if the placenta doesn't form properly, if the hormones don't hit like they're supposed to, if we don't get that nutrient transfer over to coming from the placenta instead of from the yolk, there's a lot of risk. So again, high number of miscarriages happen before that 9th week. Once we have that 9th week, the placenta is well established. We are providing most of the nutrients for the baby. So the odds of that pregnancy being successful go up astronomically. And at that point, you have a fetus. So they don't care about your embryo or pre-embryo or your zygote or anything. They just care about a fetus and beyond. So they're going to wait until they can make sure that the pregnancy is going to be successful. Okay. So it's not that they don't love you. It's not that they just don't want to get our hopes up. Charge you for something that's not going to work out. The placenta, again, also acts as an endocrine organ, which we learned way back in the first week. Remember the first week? Hopes and dreams and stuff. Crushed that, didn't we? If you don't remember the first week, you've got until Thursday comes back. So again, we're going to be making lots of hormones to let mom know we have a baby on board, so we don't have a period, so we can continue the pregnancy. So those hormones coming from the placenta, our first one is human chorionic gonadotropin. Again, chorionic because it's a chorionic membrane that is, again, is a part of the amniotic processing, the amniote processing. And we do have a different type of uterus compared to placental mammals, compared to marsupials and stuff like that. So human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG, this is the pregnancy hormone. This is the first hormone that registers in the maternal stream after implantation. So this is what the pregnancy tests are picking up. If you have this, you have a placenta, you're making this hormone. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of the false pregnancies are the fact that you've got this, but you don't make enough to stop the period, and then you have that period anyway. So just because you have a period doesn't mean that you weren't pregnant. You probably were, you just didn't have enough to sustain that pregnancy. So it is going to maintain the integrity of the corpus luteum. So the corpus luteum makes the progesterone, keeping the uterus in the quiescent state so you don't have a period. We're also going to be making estrogens. So when this hormone is up and going, you have this hormone in your bloodstream, you have estrogen and progesterone in your bloodstream at higher levels than normal. This is often what contributes to the morning sickness. It's not just because the pregnancy doing anything directly. It's all these hormones, and there's so many of them. Your medulla is picking it up as a toxin because, again, your medulla, if too much of anything, can be toxic. In this case, it's female hormones. Freaking estrogen is trying to kill you. So it's the presence of progesterone, estrogen at high levels at the same time, because normally they tag team each other. And then, of course, this hormone in the stream. So that's what makes you sensitive. That's what it makes you feel icky, because the medulla is like, oh, look at these girly hormones. Now, again, the corpus luteum, no matter how much HCG you produce, is not meant to be a permanent structure. It will go away somewhere between month 3 and 4. It just can't produce anymore. Fortunately, by that point, the placenta is big enough, established enough, it makes the estrogens and progesterones necessary. So about 3 or 4 months into your pregnancy, we're going to stop producing HCG. So if you were to do a pregnancy test, latter stages of pregnancy, it may come off as negative if we have such low amounts of this hormone, because it's not necessary anymore. So it's one of those things that it's done its job of stimulating the corpus luteum until there's no more corpus luteum present. And of course, this is why sometimes women the morning sickness will kind of get better and go away by the time your second trimester comes in, because this hormone bows out and you're already used to the estrogens and progesterones in high amounts. So it's not making you sick anymore. Human placental lactogen and placental prolactin. Again, both of these are hormones that's going to help prepare the breast for lactation. So you will make prolactin from your pituitary gland, but this is going to be that extra little boost that helps prepare for meal whenever delivery happens. It also stimulates other tissues similar to HGH. So it works like human growth hormone. This is why pregnancy weight is different to get rid of than buffet weight. So you'll often hear that it's like, it's really easy to lose, normal fat, but fat that you put on your pregnancy kind of lingers. And that's because it's put on with the hormones telling you to store the fat and to store the nutrients the way you're doing it. And when the hormone tells you to do it, you tend to do what the hormone says and keep it around. Kind of like growth hormone lets you get big and stay big. So you don't shrink as you age. So this is why it's so hard to get rid of that pregnancy weight, because it's hormone-based weight, not just buffet-based weight. And this is one of the big issues you'll see a lot with women. If their hormones are out of whack, they may have weight issues. And a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just cut calories and exercise? It's like, honey, it's not that easy. My hormones are saying fatten up, chick, where your hormones don't care. So again, hormones are going to play a big role in weight distribution, because that weight can influence fertility and all that kind of stuff. So there's that big issue with girls losing weight versus guys losing weight. It's kind of hard because the girl hormones all say fatten up for pregnancy, and then society doesn't say that. Okay, so you kind of have to go against your body trying to lose weight. Relaxin. We're going to increase the amount of relaxin we produce as we go through the pregnancy. And we introduced relaxin back in A&P2 when we talked about giving birth to big-headed babies out of those, the pelvi, so the different pelvises. So that big guy the big job of this guy is to increase the flexibility of that pubic symphysis, because this is the only place we have give. so those big-headed babies can get out, which again is why after you have your first baby, especially vaginally, even though you may lose all of your weight, your pants may not fit the same. Your hips are going to spread a little bit if that kid had a huge head, and loosen that up a little bit. So you'd be more prone to issues with a looser pubic symphysis compared to pre-pregnancy issues. Now, unfortunately, even though that's its main target, it doesn't just go to that one area. It's going to be able to affect any cartilage in the body. Just like, again, if you're going to lose fat, you might want to target belly fat, but your body burns fat across the body, so you may lose your butt and, keep your belly, whatever. So with your relaxant, it can target any cartilage. So this is where we have women have to make sure they have good posture so they don't develop permanent lordosis or kyphosis. You should wear supportive shoes so your feet don't spread. Again, your feet don't grow in pregnancy. The cartilage loosens up and they spread, and you'd have to get bigger shoes because of that. Towards the end, it also helps with the dilation of the cervix. The cervix has a little bit of fibro cartilage for support to keep the kid in, so it's going to help loosen that up and thin it out a little bit, making it easier for dilation to happen. So higher amounts can suppress the release of oxytocin. Again, because those higher amounts are happening because we're trying to loosen things up, preparing for pregnancy. You don't want to try to force that kid out when everything's still tightened together. So we have to reach a certain amount of looseness before this dies off, and then we can go into that labor. And then, of course, progesterone and estrogen both at the same time, so no more tag teaming. Progesterone helps to maintain the uterine lining, keeps the smooth muscles from contracting, so it keeps the uterus in that quiescent state, in that secretory phase. And, of course, estrogen is going to increase. So progesterone will be your dominant hormone during that pregnancy. Now, as we continue through the pregnancy, estrogen is going to rise and rise and rise. And once estrogen becomes the dominant hormone, you're going to have a period. Now, obviously, if it's a normal month, you just get rid of your lining. If you're pregnant, that period comes with that prize at the end, right? Comes with the baby. So it's the estrogen becoming dominant that causes that shedding of the endometrial lining and allowing for everything to exit. Oh, there it is, growing up, being all cutesy. Okay, so here we can see the little yolk sac, and we're starting to build the placenta and all that. And of course, the placenta is an indirect connection to mom, not a direct connection. So no mixing of maternal and offspring blood. So you're going to have the capillaries of the placenta next to the capillaries in the functional layer. So they're just going to exchange back and forth via diffusion, osmosis, facilitated diffusion, stuff like that. So again, indirect, not a direct exchange of nutrients and oxygens and so forth. And again, that baby will have that yolk sac until they use it all up, whether they're using it up as nutrient sources or by making blood and all that kind of stuff that the yolk sac's doing for us. Our final thing that happens in the first trimester is embryogenesis. You just can't have a little soccer ball giving birth or a cluster or layering of cells. We want to have a little human-looking child. So you're going to have to make the embryo, going to have to make the baby. This should, again, be around day 16. We're going to start that embryogenesis process, go through and make an embryo. So day 1 is a zygote. After the first division, it is the pre-embryo. Day 3, it's the morula. Day 5 is the blastocyst. It's all still considered pre-embryo, just stages of pre-embryo, all the way up until we build an embryo. And, of course, once we get to day 16 and we start building the embryo, arms and legs and stuff, now it's an embryo. At this point, you can tell the front from the back, the sides from the sides, lefts, rights, all that kind of fun stuff. During embryogenesis, you'll also have organogenesis, so the building of all of your organ systems. So again, if you don't get it built in this first trimester, you're never going to have it. So everything has to be built between day 16 and week 8. So by the time we reach the end of week 8, everything should be in place. Now we just have to grow it. So day 16 to the end of week 8, we are that embryo. Once we have reached the end of week 8, which is also the beginning of week 9, depending on your point of view, at this point, the placenta is the dominant source of nutrients. Everything is built and established. We're not building anything else. Now we have a fetus. Okay, so depending on what stage we're in, we may have an embryo, pre-embryo, morula, fetus, what have you. And again, this is when your OBGYN will want to see you. They just care about fetus and beyond. Anything below that, there still could be a hiccup. something could not get formed, something could go wrong, and it's not going to be a successful pregnancy. So once we hit fetus stage, we just grow it. So success rates of pregnancy goes up a whole bunch. There it is. Isn't it adorable? Yeah, it is. It's complaining that it's about to graduate from high school. That's what this one is doing. So this is my wee one, and of course this is the fetus, so it doesn't look human yet. Okay, back in the day, sonograms weren't, as clear as they are today, but you can still see his little tail. They're adorable. He still had his tail, still had his yolk sac, still pretty prominent. Of course, at this point, the face is still in the prey position, not the prey position, but the I'm lunch position. So we don't look human yet. So even though the fetus is established as a fetus, it's not looking, it could be a chicken, you could have a baby shark up in there. Depends on what kind of sci-fi movie you're watching, what could be up there. But it's still got some work to do. Still adorable. We're gonna go home and slap it. I didn't get to have, he had a hot spot with his epidural, so I felt like he came out of my leg. My kids suck. The second one was too fast for an epidural. Double slap. All right. So second trimester, next 3 months after the first trimester. At this point, we're just growing the fetus. Everything's made, everything's prepared. We just got to get it bigger so it can survive out in the world, because obviously no one has gummy bear-sized children. Okay. So the fetus is going to start growing faster than the surrounding placenta at this point. So it's going to end up being bigger than the placenta and the rest of the conceptions. At this point, it will start to look distinctly human. So during the second trimester, you're going to have the eyes move from the prey position to the predator position. Everything lines up along the midline. Again, we talked about this in A&P1 with the skull bone formations and so forth coming into play. That's when your hand is going to rotate. So you'll notice your big toes on the inside, but your thumbs are on the outside in anatomical position. So at some point, you actually have the rotation of the hands where they're the opposite of the feet. So in the beginning, the thumbs are on the inside. And again, this is, if you look at dogs and cats, their dew claws closer to the middle part of their body instead of the outer part of your body, because they don't rotate like we rotate. We rotate so we can climb trees. Dogs and cats aren't very good at, dogs are not very good at climbing. Cats are good at going up, but not always going down, right? Right. They're not going to use their thumbs, obviously, for climbing like a primate would or a squirrel would. They're going to use mostly claw action. But here you'll find that you're having a human instead of a baby shark or something. And then the third trimester. About this point, mom wants everything out, but then there's a little bit of a, it's going to come out, it's not going to be pretty. Okay, so most of your organ systems become ready to fulfill their normal functions. All the organs are going to be working except for the lungs. So of course, during the third trimester, this is when you start feeling your baby move around. They kick you in the ribs. If you try to slouch, that kind of scenario, they might get the hiccups. They dream, they hear, they sleep. They can technically see, but it's all a bunch of darkness, so what's the point? But everything but lungs are working at this point in time. The growth rate is going to decrease. So if you look at the beginning of the third trimester and the end of the third trimester, baby doesn't grow a whole lot in inches. What we do is we start packing on the pounds, right? We're going to start gaining fat, because that fat's going to not only provide us with nutrients, but it's going to keep us warm, because inside is nice and warm and toasty. Outside, not so much. Unless you're born in August, it's not the same as body temperature. So you have to be able to deal with the outside extreme. So you need all that fat to do that. So the largest weight gain happens in the third trimester. This stage should be followed by birth. If not, you go in after them and victim, right? And get home. Twins are usually born somewhere around 35 weeks, just because there's no more room in the inn. They got to get out. Single births, roughly 40 weeks. And again, they know when they know it's their timing if they're ready to come out. There she is, and this is why it's so freaking uncomfortable. So the uterus is just taking up all the room along with the baby. The intestines are all over the place. And of course, this is why sometimes women who are in the latter stages may have issues with constipation, because they're kicking and preventing the poop from moving to where it needs to go. That kind of scenario. Your liver shoved up into your thoracic cavity. Again, all the organs moving up is why a lot of times pregnant women might be kind of short of breath or feel like they're panting all the time. They can't expand their lungs normal because their freaking liver's in the same space their lung is normally hanging out. So everything's kind of shoved up and out of the way. Again, we make room for that big-headed baby who's now using your bladder as a pillow, so you have to pee every 5 seconds as it headbutts you constantly. Don't have kids. So what is that baby doing to mom other than stretch marks and anguish? So respiratory rates and tidal volumes are going to go up. You have to provide you with oxygen, but you have to provide baby with oxygen as well. Maternal blood volume will increase by about 50%. This is why there will always be some bleeding during delivery, and it's tolerated. You don't usually go into circulatory shock because you have more blood than you originally had. Now, that doesn't mean that you're safe. You could go into circulatory shock if you drop way too low, but there's a cushion there because you have extra blood now. Maternal requirements of nutrients, this one's a tricky thing, only goes up 10 to 30%. So we're, very used to saying, oh, we're eating for 2 now. Even though your baby's the size of a gummy bear, you don't need to eat a whole whole pie of pizza there. Your rates only go up 10 to 30%. So you should be eating for 1 1/3, not for 2. Course. And again, you don't want to tell the pregnant woman that because she's going to get angry with you and you can't fight back because she's really frowned upon to slap pregnant people, right? It's the only time you get away with stuff. So you don't need all that extra nutrients. You just need a little bit more, a little bit boost to help out. Glomerular filtration rate goes up by 50%. You got 50% more blood to filter. So of course you're going to be filtering a lot more. Plus there's more waste because the waste coming from the baby. So double whammy. The uterus is going to increase in size. So by the end of that pregnancy, it can contain roughly 5 liters of fluid, of baby, of all the conceptions going on. So the organ can weigh 22 pounds plus baby. So the average weight gain for a pregnant woman is 25 to 30 pounds. So again, depending on your kid, if you have 22 pounds of stuff plus a 7-pounder, then you should be gaining only 29 pounds. Anything above 30 is your parting gift from your pregnancy. It's just fact. Okay, so anything above 30 is not necessary. So if you gain 100 pounds in that pregnancy, mazel tov, you're going to keep 75 of it when the kid comes out. Hope you like it because it's going to be there for a while. And of course, mammary glands may increase in size during this time because of that placental prolactin and lactinogen, and may start their secretory activity. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be full on milking mode while you're still pregnant. You may just get pregnancy breasts, so a little bit of swelling. Some women don't get pregnancy breasts. Their milk doesn't drop until they give delivery, and then they wake up the next day and they're Dolly Parton. So it all depends on you and your hormones. All right. So we can deliver our children tomorrow, and have extra time to study for the practical today. Or we can keep talking about it. Ooh, we've got the Simpson in the race. So, study for practical? Birth this kid? I don't think. If you have your genetic problems, you can go ahead and turn them in if you would like to. I can get started on grading those because you may hate doing them. I hate grading them. It takes a while. So obviously tomorrow we will finish up delivering our offspring, 9 slides, and then we will have review time for the test that opens tomorrow and closes on Wednesday. Maybe. The answer is yeah.
Okay.
I heard my name.
Yeah, me.
Okay.
So you said how I guess the pregnancy stage is up to 40 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that Jackie Chan was in his home for a whole year? So is that a lie?
That's not biologically
It has to be a
possible.
lie?
Yeah, it has to be.
Because that
No. The baby will die if he's into it.
Right. Yeah. All right, I am. Sorry. I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, they're all over Jacob.
Just kidding.
Mine are out of order.
Awkward.
Their numbers. I didn't take
She has a liver in her mouth.
That's part of the question. That's the thing. I didn't tell you, so you have to figure it out. That's the question. You don't know if they're hetero or homo, because I didn't tell you. You have to figure out if they're hetero. And that's going to plug in the letters and figure it out. Just like figuring for X.
Hello.
Why do you have different letters? You have N's and D's. You have to use the same.
I hate
Yeah, when you're looking for a single trait, you always use the same letter. Yeah. So if you would use little d, since you use D over here. He's got the dominant trait, but is that the only way somebody's going to have express the dominant traits? We gotta work it out.
Okay. Everybody done?
I don't know. I looked at the video and that's kind of what.
We went over it on
I
Wednesday.
was still so lost. So I considered. You have a question, Darren?
Over there.
That's how I set it up.
That's how you said it?
I have 2 daughters and this is your son, right?
You do need to define what those are.
That's non-hemophilia.
No, I mean, you just say hemophilic. Are those girls or boys?
Oh, okay. Okay, so I did that one. Is this supposed to be the same? Okay, I didn't hear. Okay, I was making sure that I was sure that. If it's higher, they have a
One of
big
each.
one, okay. That's the same one.
Test is today?
The practical is today. The test is Tuesday. Wednesday.
And then.